You know, friends, I've spent decades studying the mechanics of power in capitalist systems, watching how institutions bend and reshape themselves to serve the interests of the ruling class. But even I was struck by the brazen performance we witnessed in Kash Patel's recent Senate hearings. What we saw wasn't just political theater, it was a masterclass in how power operates when it no longer feels the need to hide its true nature. Let me break this down for you, because what happened in those hearing rooms tells us everything we need to know about the current state of American democracy. And believe me, that America is not in safe hands at all. I'm avoiding fancy edits in the video for you to actually concentrate on what really matters. First, let's talk about Patel's technique. Throughout his confirmation hearing and subsequent oversight appearances, we watched a man who had clearly been coached in the fine art of saying nothing while appearing to say something. This isn't accidental, folks. This is a deliberate strategy that reveals the contempt this administration has for democratic accountability. When senators pressed Patel about the Jeffrey Epstein files, arguably one of the most significant criminal investigations involving the wealthy and powerful in recent memory, his responses were textbook examples of bureaucratic stonewalling. He claimed there was no credible information that Epstein trafficked women to others, a statement so absurd it would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Think about what this means. We have documented evidence of Epstein's connections to powerful figures across business, politics, and royalty. We know about his private island, his Manhattan mansion, his web of relationships with the global elite. Yet Patel, now heading the FBI, wants us to believe this was all a one-man operation. This isn't incompetence. This is a deliberate effort to protect the powerful from accountability. Now, let's examine what's really at stake with these Epstein files. The Democratic representatives asked pointed questions about whether Donald Trump's name appears in these documents, and Patel's response was telling. He refused to answer directly, instead deflecting with claims that he hadn't even reviewed all the files. Stop and think about that for a moment. The director of the FBI, appointed specifically because of his loyalty to Trump, claims he hasn't bothered to review the files in what he himself acknowledged was the largest sex trafficking case the FBI has ever been a part of. This isn't negligence. This is willful ignorance designed to provide plausible deniability. The pattern becomes clear when you look at who benefits from this ignorance. The same wealthy class that has captured our economic system has now captured our law enforcement apparatus. The FBI, under Patel's direction, isn't investigating the powerful, it's protecting them. Representative Eric Swalwell exposed this beautifully when he pointed out that Patel, as FBI director, hadn't even bothered to review all the evidence in this massive case. The buck stops at the top, Swalwell said, and Patel's evasive response revealed everything about his priorities. But the Epstein files are just one piece of a larger puzzle. Senator Durbin revealed something even more troubling during these hearings, that Patel has been personally directing the ongoing purge of FBI officials. This isn't reform, friends. This is the systematic dismantling of institutional independence. When authoritarian movements capture democratic institutions, they don't eliminate them. They hollow them out and fill them with loyalists. That's exactly what we're seeing with Patel's leadership of the FBI. Experienced counterterrorism agents are being pushed out, not because they're ineffective, but because they might actually do their jobs and investigate crimes wherever they lead, regardless of the political consequences. This purge serves multiple purposes. First, it removes potential obstacles to the administration's agenda. Second, it sends a message to remaining FBI personnel about what happens to those who don't demonstrate sufficient loyalty. Third, it creates a climate of fear that makes real investigation of powerful interests nearly impossible. Let's apply some basic economic analysis to what we're witnessing. In any system, you have to ask who benefits from particular policies or actions. The wealthy class that dominates our economic system has a clear interest in preventing investigations that might expose their criminal behavior. The Epstein case threatened to reveal the extent of corruption and criminality among the global elite. By installing a loyalist like Patel and allowing him to claim ignorance about the files, the system protects itself. The cost of this protection isn't borne by the wealthy, it's borne by the victims of trafficking and by a society that loses faith in its institutions. This is how capitalism works, folks. The same class that exploits workers economically also captures the state apparatus to protect itself from accountability. Patel's performance in these hearings is just the latest example of this dynamic in action. What struck me most about these hearings was how they revealed the hollow nature of our democratic processes. The senators asked their questions, Patel gave his non-answers, and the media reported it as normal political theater. But there was nothing normal about what we witnessed. In a functioning democracy, a law enforcement official who refuses to answer direct questions about major criminal investigations would face real consequences. Instead, we watched Patel evade, deflect, and outright refuse to provide information to the people's representatives with no meaningful accountability. And this isn't the failure of the system. This is the system working exactly as it's designed to work for the capitalist class. Democratic forms are maintained while democratic substance is gutted. The hearings provide the appearance of oversight while ensuring that real oversight never occurs. The elephant in the room, of course, is Trump's relationship with Epstein. We know they were associates. We know Trump made comments about Epstein liking them on the younger side. We know Trump was a frequent guest at Epstein's properties. Yet when pressed about whether Trump's name appears in the FBI's files, Patel suddenly becomes selective about what information he can share. This selective memory is strategic. Patel was willing to address Trump's proximity to Epstein, but only in ways beneficial to the president, claiming there were no questionable photos of Trump with underage girls. But he became cautious when asked about other victims or broader patterns of trafficking. The message is clear. The FBI under Patel exists to protect Trump, not to investigate him. What we're witnessing with Patel's leadership of the FBI represents a broader shift in how the capitalist class maintains its power. In previous eras, they maintained the pretense of equal justice under law, even while the system systematically favored the wealthy. Now they're abandoning even that pretense. This represents a dangerous escalation in class warfare. When the wealthy can openly capture law enforcement agencies and use them to protect their own interests while persecuting their enemies, we're moving toward a more openly authoritarian form of capitalism. The working class needs to understand what's happening here. The same forces that suppress wages, destroy unions, and concentrate wealth are now openly capturing the institutions that are supposed to provide checks and balances on their power. So, where does this leave us? First, we need to abandon any illusions about the neutrality of American institutions. The FBI, under Patel's leadership, is not a neutral law enforcement agency, it's an instrument of class power. Second, we need to understand that traditional democratic processes by themselves are insufficient to address this level of institutional capture. When the people asking the questions have no real power to enforce accountability, the hearings become meaningless theater. Third, we need to build alternative sources of power. This means organizing workers, building independent media, and creating parallel institutions that can't be captured by wealthy interests. The Patel hearings weren't just about one man's evasive answers to Senate questions. They were a window into how power operates in late stage capitalism, when the ruling class no longer feels the need to maintain even the appearance of democratic accountability. The question now is whether the American people will recognize what they're seeing and respond accordingly. Because what we witnessed in those hearing rooms wasn't democracy in action, it was democracy being systematically dismantled before our eyes, one evasive answer at a time. The machinery of obfuscation is running at full speed, friends. The only question is whether we'll let it grind our democratic institutions to dust, or whether we'll finally build the power necessary to shut it down and create something better in its place. The choice, as always, is ours to make.